From wolves and foxes to wild dogs and the extinct dire wolf, the family Canidae spans more than 35 living species and a deep fossil record across every continent except Antarctica. In this video, we'll trace their evolution, diversity and classification, covering every known genus, species and subspecies, past and present. Prohesperocyon is a late Eocene, basal cynoid that sits just outside true Canidae, highlighting the stem of the dog lineage with emerging canid-like traits such as shearing carnassial, an elongated muzzle and more cursorial, digitigrade limbs. Fox-sized and lightly built, it was likely a small prey hunter-scavenger, making it a key precursor that anchors early cynoidea diversification and frames how dog-like mammals evolved before the crowned canids. Hesperocyon, recognized by two species, is among the earliest canids of late Eocene North America, appearing soon after the basal canid radiation and before the later Hesperocyoninae, Borophagine and canine diversifications. As the eponym of Hesperocyona, it sits near the canid stem and predates the major lineages that ultimately produced the extinct Borophaginae and the living Caninae. Fox-sized and elongate, it had a long tail, short limbs, 5-toed feet, and already canid-like teeth, features consistent with a generalized carnivore, omnivore rather than the later hypercarnivorous bone crackers. It captures the shift from more plantigrade, possibly scansorial ancestors toward increasingly cursorial, digitigrade dogs, making it a key taxon for interpreting early canid ecology and phylogeny. Mesocyon is a Hesperocyonine canid from the Oligocene to early Miocene of North America, with fossils documented in Oregon, Southern California, and the northern Great Plains. Roughly coyote-sized and somewhat short-faced, it shows running-adapted, digitigrade limbs and a dentition that sheared flesh yet retained some crushing capacity. Crucially, Mesocyon is often cited as the earliest canid with a primarily meat-based diet, signaling an early turn toward hypercarnivory within the Mesocyon and Hydrocyon clade that shaped later canid ecomorphs. Cynodesmus is an Oligocene Hesperocyonine from North America that helped establish a recognizably dog-like boplan, coyote-sized, with a shorter skull, heavier tail, and elongated hindquarters relative to many modern canids. Its limb proportions imply ambush rather than long pursuit. It retained 5 toes with partially retractile claws, and after Wang's 1994 revision the genus is now narrowly delimited, underscoring its value as a marker of early canid diversification. Sunkahatanka occupies a pivotal rung within the Mesocyon, Cynodesmus, and Hydrocyon sequence, its morphology bridging smaller, earlier dog-like taxa and the later hypercarnivore and Hydrocyon. Dentally and postcranially, it signals stronger meat slicing and more robust jaw function, marking a transitional stage that foreshadows the bone-cracking adaptations intensified in Hydrocyon and its relatives. Philotrox is an Oligocene Hesperocyonine. Like Sunkahatanka, morphologically it sits between smaller Cynodesmus and the hypercarnivorous and Hydrocyon. Coyote-sized with increasingly powerful jaws and accentuated shearing dentition, it marks an early step toward bone-cracking predation in Hesperocyonines, a key transition from generalized dog-like ancestors to specialized hypercarnivores. Hydrocyon is an Oligocene, early Miocene Hesperocyonine from North America within the Mesocyon and Hydrocyon lineage, representing a more derived branch of early canid evolution. Powerfully built yet compact, short snout, deep-jawed, and estimated near 10 kilograms, it shows a hypercarnivorous dentition. The skull's otter-like profile even inspired its name. Functionally, it represents the first clear move toward specialized predation in Canidae, inaugurating a recurrent trend to large-bodied hypercarnivory documented across multiple canid radiations. Hydrocyon is an early Miocene form whose dentition indicates a primarily meat-based ecology rather than generalized omnivory. Recognized as its own lineage within Hesperocyoninae, it refines early canid diversification by highlighting a feeding mechanical path distinct from the contemporaneous Mesocian and Hydrocyon radiation. Known from a partial cranium and distinguished by shortened upper premolars, an enlarged caniniform upper third incisor, and reduced upper molars, Canidae shows a dental suite pointing to meso to hypercarnivory and hinting at affinities with Hydrocyon. Though primitive in several respects, its incipient bone-cracking adaptations and precise occlusion flag an early step toward specialized meat-eating within Hesperocyoninae, clarifying how feeding mechanics diversified among the first canids. Ectopocinus is an Oligocene, early Miocene Hesperocyonine, known mostly from jaws and teeth that show simple, short, robust, blunt premolars and reduced molar cusps, features signaling a powerful, meat-focused bite across its small suite of species. Functionally, it documents an early move toward bone-cracking hypercarnivory within Hesperocyoninae, converging on and Hydrocyon-like specializations and exemplifying the repeated evolution of strong-jawed predators in canids. Osbornodon is a North American Hesperocyonine ranging from the Oligocene into the early Miocene and represents the last surviving lineage of that subfamily. Across its 7 named species, earlier forms were small fox to coyote-sized and more omnivorous, whereas later members became larger and more predaceous, culminating in the wolf-sized Osbornodon fricki. Dentally and cranially, the genus tracks a shift toward stronger slicing and more robust jaw function within Hesperocyoninae, echoing broader canid trends toward repeated evolution of hypercarnivory. As the terminal radiation of Hesperocyoninae before that group's Miocene disappearance, Osbornodon closes the earliest canid experiment and frames subsequent canid diversification. Archaeocyon was an early Oligocene borophagine and among the first of the subfamily to appear, with fossils from the northern Great Plains to the Pacific coast. Small and relatively unspecialized, it retained a generalized postcranium with plantigrade feet and teeth indicating mild hypocarnivory rather than cutting-edge hypercarnivory. Subtle dental specializations place it securely within Borophaginae rather than basal Hesperocyoninae, making Archaeocyon a key benchmark for the dawn of bone dog diversification. Oxytocyon is known from sparse jaws, teeth, and a partial skull, yet its hypocarnivorous dentition ties it to omnivory and hints at an affinity with the unusual Odorocyon. As part of a basal, fox-sized cluster of borophagines, it frames the early experimentation in diet and form that preceded later bone-cracking specialists. Odorocyon, a small early Oligocene borophagine of the northern Great Plains, is distinguished by a short, broad skull, a notably specialized middle ear, tall simple premolars, and molars trending toward hypocarnivory. Despite its antiquity, its cranial configuration converges on that of the living fennec, implying similar ecological habits and marking one of the subfamily's earliest forays into sensory and dietary specialization. Rhizocyon was a small, Early Oligocene borophagine whose slightly derived skull and dentition step beyond Archeocene-like ancestors. Stratigraphically constrained to the John Day sequence, it anchors the base of later borophagines and helps trace the first stages of the bone dog radiation. Synarctoid spans the early Oligocene to Middle Miocene in 7 tiny species, each estimated under roughly a kilogram. Its unusual molars, simplified and solenodont-leaning rather than blade-like, signal omnivory to mild herbivory rather than strict carnivory. Within early Borophaginae it filled a distinct small-bodied niche alongside, rather than within, the raccoon-like Pleiocyon lineage. By documenting a deep-rooted turn toward omnivory, Synarctoids shows that dietary breadth was explored long before the iconic bone crushers evolved. Pleiocyon, a North American borophagine from the early Oligocene to early Miocene, belongs among early hypocarnivorous experiments rather than later durophagous forms. About 80 centimeters long and superficially raccoon-like, it probably climbed and foraged nimbly, with a short broad skull and forward-facing orbit suggesting agile, perhaps crepuscular activity. Dental proportions lack fully specialized slicing carnassials and point to omnivory, contrasting with the later hypercarnivorous borophagines. By broadening canid ecological roles early in borophagine history, Pleiocyon helps explain repeated shifts between omnivory and predation across subsequent radiations. Multiple species capture this spectrum from small basal forms to larger, more predaceous taxa, making the genus a waypoint in evolving diets and skull mechanics. Cormocyon, an Oligocene, early Miocene borophagine, occupies a transitional position near the base of the tribe, bridging small-bodied Pleiocyanines and the larger Synarctans. Craniodental form and small to medium body size imply an omnivorous lifestyle rather than specialized hypercarnivory, underscoring early dietary experimentation before the rise of bone crushers. Desmocyon, rare in the record from the late Oligocene to early Miocene, is usually treated as a primitive transitional borophaginine. Its skull and teeth, plus associated skeletons, including preserved portions of the baculum, point to a more meat-oriented ecology than strictly omnivorous contemporaries and situated close to early bone dog diversification. Parasynarctus, a small early to middle Miocene member of the hypocarnivorous Synarctina, lacks the bone-cracking premolars of later borophagines and reads as omnivorous. By documenting a non-hypercarnivorous pathway inside Borophaginae, it helps track how early lineages diversified in diet and form across western and mid-continental North America. Synarctus ranges from around 16 to 10 million years with occurrences from California and Nebraska to Maryland and Texas. Its dentition lacks classic bone-crushing specializations and repeatedly signals omnivory, hence the large dog-like raccoon comparisons. New material from Maryland, the coyote-sized Synarctus wangi, reinforces that interpretation by indicating a diet dominated by plants and invertebrates and extending the genus along the Atlantic coast. By exemplifying hypocarnivory within Borophaginae, Synarctus maps the clade's early ecological breadth prior to the emergence of true bone crushers. Metatomarctus, known especially from Metatomarctus cannabis, is an early to middle Miocene form of intermediate size that was more predaceous than earlier borophagines, with fossils from Florida's Thomas Farm and beyond. Its dental proportions, such as a cusp-like canid on the lower molars, point to meat-leaning ecology and an incremental move toward specialized predation within the subfamily. Euoplosian, an intermediate-sized borophagine, shows craniodental adaptations for a heavily meat-based diet. The three recognized species, Brachygnathus in Montana's Flint Creek beds and Spicidans and Predator in Florida's Alachua Formation, map a west-east spread across North America. By capturing an early shift toward predaceous ecomorphology, Eoplosian documents one of several escalations to hypercarnivory within canids. Salidocyon, another intermediate-sized Borophaginae, is well known from Skull Ridge and bears craniodental traits consistent with heavy meat consumption. Filling a predatory niche early in the radiation, it helps trace the stepwise drift toward greater hypercarnivory that would culminate in the classic bone-crushing dogs. Microtomarctus, of intermediate size and more predaceous than earlier members, is recorded from Nebraska, coastal southeast Texas, California, Nevada, and Colorado. Reinforced jaws and premolars fit the borophagine trend toward durophagy, foreshadowing the hypercarnivorous, bone-cracking specializations perfected later. Protomarctus, a Middle Miocene taxon first recovered from Thompson Quarry in the Sheep Creek Formation of western Nebraska, represents an intermediate-sized, more predaceous borophagine. Its short face and robust jaws relative to earlier forms mark stronger slicing and incipient durophagy that presage the full, bone-dogged suite. Tephrosion is a Barstovian, intermediate-sized borophagine known from scattered sites in western Nebraska, Wyoming, eastern Oregon, New Mexico, and North Florida, including species such as Rurestris and Siculus. More predatory than earlier borophagines, it flags a mid-Miocene uptick in meat-focused craniodental function within Borophaginae. Tomarctus, widespread in the late early to middle Miocene, is notable for a short muzzle and deep, powerfully built jaws indicating strong bite forces and hyena-like durophagy. Two species are generally recognized, Brevirostris and Hippophaga. Functioning as a predator, scavenger in mixed carnivore guilds, Tomarctus traces the borophagine march toward bone-crushing adaptations later amplified in Aelurodon and Borophagus. Aelurodon, emblematic of the middle, late Miocene, belongs to the Aelurodontine line trending toward progressively stronger premolars and hypercarnivorous dentitions, forming an anagenetic series from Tomarctus to large-bodied species like Ferox and Taxoids. Robust, short-snout skulls and deep jaws indicate powerful bites suited to processing bone, and craniodental plus body size evidence has even been used to argue that some large species hunted cooperatively. With multiple species across the central and western U.S. and a well-resolved evolutionary sequence, Aelurodon anchors a major escalation toward large, specialized canid predators. Paratomarctus, a mid-late Miocene, roughly coyote-sized borophagine, remained comparatively unspecialized in its jaws and is widespread across the western U.S., coexisting with Borophagus, Epicyon, Aelurodon, and early Canis. Near the group's terminus, it helps frame the final phase of borophagine history and the lineage from which later late Miocene borophagines emerged as canines rose. Carpocyon, represented by 4 species in the middle to late Miocene, ranged from small coyote-like forms to wolf-sized C. webi and is distributed broadly across the central and western U.S. All species carry relatively small, simplified cheek teeth that point to more omnivory than in contemporary bone crackers. Anatomical descriptions place the genus among borophagines that tone down durophagy, illustrating a parallel track of hypocarnivory within a clade better known for hypercarnivory. Endocast work on C. webi shows comparatively large neurocranial development among borophagines, highlighting the cognitive and ecological breadth explored before the group's late Miocene decline. Protopicon, a Barstovian Middle Miocene borophagine known from California and New Mexico, bore a short muzzle, deep jaws, and reinforced cutting and crushing premolars that inaugurate the terminal hypercarnivorous trend. Functionally a wolf-sized top predator and placed phylogenetically just antecedent to Epicyon, it anchors the mid-Miocene transition from generalized borophagines to giant bone crushers. Epicyon, the giant middle to late Miocene borophagine, had a short snout, deep-jawed, bone-crushing skull. The type species Haydenii is widely regarded as the largest canid ever. Enlarged premolars with reduced grinding basins indicate marked durophagy and hypercarnivory, consistent with biomechanical interpretations of bone-cracking canids. Limb and inner ear studies suggest a locomotor repertoire from ambush to pounce pursuit, while body size and craniodental evidence have been used both to propose and to question pack hunting. Borophagus, with its distinctive domed forehead and massively muscled jaws, was once stereotyped as a habitual scavenger. Yet its fossils are abundant and widespread, and many authors argue it often dominated carnivore guilds and hunted actively, with bone cracking compatible with social predation. Direct evidence includes coprolites of Borophagus parvus packed with bone fragments, and even communal latrine sites, implicating heavy osteophagy and social, territorial behavior. Adults were about coyote length but far more powerfully built, a physique consistent with durophagy, and together the anatomy, coprolites, and abundance portray a hyena-like canid that thoroughly exploited carcasses, whether as hunter or opportunist, in a niche now absent from North America. Leptocyon, a fox-sized lineage that first appears in North America at the dawn of the Oligocene, is widely regarded as the earliest canini. It comprises around 4 species averaging 2 kilograms, with the diminutive delicatus the smallest canid yet known, and its gracile, quick-snatching jaws contrast with those of its contemporary sister clade, the bone-crushing Borophaginae. It shows a long, narrow muzzle with diastema-separated premolars and delicate dentition adapted for agile predation, while ecologically it was likely omnivorous with little dietary shift through the Miocene. Leptocyon's prolonged, conservative tenure set the stage for later canid radiations. By the late Miocene some lineages had converged on modern fox ecomorphs, foreshadowing vulpine origins and the broader diversification of canini. Eurocyon sits at the base of the living canid tree according to whole genome work, and its record reaches back to the Upper Pliocene with Eurocyon progressus in Kansas, a form widely interpreted as ancestral to the modern gray fox. Biologically it is a nimble, omnivorous, medium-sized canid with grizzled gray pelage and a black-striped tail. Uniquely among North American canids it climbs trees using rotating wrists and semi-retractable claws, a trait that expands its foraging niche and escape options. Its evolutionary importance is twofold. As the most basal extant canid it anchors inferences about early canid genome evolution, and its island fox offshoot has become a centerpiece for studies of rapid divergence, drift, and conservation genetics. Cynotherium was a small, insular canid endemic to Sardinia, Corsica by the early to middle Pleistocene, with a slender, wedge-shaped skull and a reduced turn cochlea consistent with high-frequency hearing and a stock-and-pounce ecology focused on small prey such as the endemic Sardinian pica. Genomically it is the closest known relative of the modern dhole, diverging 885,000 years and carrying signals of admixture between Canis-related and Lycaon-related ancestries. Morphologically, older Sardinian material retains intermediacy with the presumed mainland ancestor Xenocyon, making Cynotherium a key model for island dwarfing and reticulate canid evolution. Dominating many late Pleistocene lowlands across the Americas, dire wolf was roughly Yukon wolf-sized but carried a heavier, broad-muzzled skull with enlarged shearing carnassial and exceptional canine bite forces, an apparatus linked to subduing megafauna such as horses, bison, camels and other large herbivores. Genomes sequenced from Rancho La Brea and elsewhere reveal that dire wolves were not true Canis at all but the last of an ancient New World canid lineage, whose spectacular abundance in the La Brea asphalt deposits and disappearance near the end of the Pleistocene make them a touchstone for studying community collapse and canid phylogeny. Lycaon was a jackal-sized, around 15 kilograms, coyote-like canid that appears in North America by the late Middle Miocene and is generally interpreted as an omnivorous generalist. Its fossils span a wide range in United States and it later turns up across the Old World. At the end of the Miocene, a Lycaon event marks its dispersal into Eurasia, Africa, and several authors have proposed that lineages within this genus seeded the subsequent Canis radiation. An African species from Langebanweg, Khoikhoi, even preserves paleopathologies, multiple exostoses including an osteochondroma, offering a rare glimpse into the life history and skeletal disease of a Neopliocene canid. Taken together, Lycaon's modest build, broad geography, and timely dispersal make it a pivotal stem Canini for understanding how small, adaptable dogs paved the way for later wolves and jackals. Mesesian, an insular, hypercarnivorous canid endemic to Java's trinil fauna, underwent marked dwarfing to a jackal, dhole-like size and appears to have targeted small prey in the 2 to 10 kilograms range, likely birds and rodents. Its compact, dhole-reminiscent build within the Homo erectus, bearing trinil ecosystem makes it a sharp case study of how island settings retool carnivore morphology, diet, and guild structure in Southeast Asia. Megascion, Merriam's dog, was a wolf-sized, hypercarnivorous canid of early Pleistocene Java whose dentition shows a relatively enlarged hypocone compared with its mainland ancestor Xenocyon and whose ecology likely centered on large ungulates such as deer. Functionally and phylogenetically, it represents a pivotal insular stage, a large-bodied Xenocyon-derived form that seeded the later dwarf lineage Mesesian, illuminating how island environments and carnivore guild pressures reshaped canid body size and niches. Lupulella unites Africa's two true living jackals, the black-backed and side-striped, into a monophyletic lineage that sits outside the Canis Lycaon clade, a placement now recommended by the International Union for the Conservation of Nature Canid Specialist Group and adopted by the American Society of Mammalogists. In the field they're readily told apart. The black-backed jackal carries a crisp dark saddle over rufous flanks, whereas the side-striped jackal shows a grizzled coat with pale flank stripes and a dark tail with a whitish tip, reflecting their broad but partly segregated habitats. Ecologically they are opportunistic omnivores and accomplished scavengers. Black-backed jackals in particular concentrate around large carnivores' kills, while side-striped jackals lean heavily on invertebrates, small mammals, fruit, and carrion depending on season. Because this genus represents an early branching African canid line that is still widespread and behaviorally flexible, Lupulella is central to studies of canid systematics and to understanding how mesopredators structure and respond to savanna and woodland carnivore guilds. Lycaon, the African wild dog, is instantly recognizable by its mottled, painted coat, outsized rounded ears, long limbs, and four-toed 4 feet lacking dewclaws, plus trenchant-heeled carnassials adapted to rapid flesh shearing. Biologically it is an obligate cooperative hunter. Packs coordinate endurance chases of medium, large ungulates and then socially provision pups and other group members, a strategy whose efficiency and constraints scale with group size. Conservation-wise, it is the only living species in its genus and is endangered, persisting as around 6,600 adults in 39 fragmented subpopulations, making it a flagship for both canid evolution and savanna carnivore guild management. The dhole is a monotypic Asian canid with a lean, russet build and a distinctive dental reduction that complements its cooperative, endurance-based hunts. Packs keep cohesion with high-pitched, whistle, calls uncommon among terrestrial mammals. Conservation-wise, it is endangered, with global assessments indicating 2,500 mature individuals and ongoing declines across a now fragmented range, making the genus pivotal for understanding how social hunting, specialized dentition and human pressures intersect in canid evolution and management. Canis crystallized from earlier Lycaon, grade Canids. North American forms appear by the late Miocene, with the jackal to coyote-like Lopophagus often placed near the base of wolf, coyote lineages. In the Old World, the mid-Pliocene wolf-sized Chileensis in northern China shows hypercarnivorous teeth and healed injuries consistent with active predation and social hunting. An early Pleistocene wolf event then sees Canis diversify and spread across the Palearctic, with taxa such as Arnensis, Etruscus and later Mosbacensis marking a sequence from medium-sized forms to small early wolves. Against that backdrop, the Eurasian golden jackal retains a compact, long-torsoed frame and Catholic diet. Recent assessments track a broadly stable, expanding distribution across parts of Eurasia. By contrast, the Ethiopian wolf is a high-elevation rodent specialist, slender, long-limbed, and socially cohesive, now endangered due to disease from dogs, hybridization risk and habitat pressure in fragmented Afro-alpine refugia. Africa also holds the African golden wolf, a distinct wolf-like species long confused with golden jackals but shown by genetics to be separate and more closely allied to the gray wolf complex. The domestic dog emerges from prehistoric wolf populations yet is not simply derived from any living wolf. Ancient genomes indicate dogs are mostly related to Eastern Eurasian wolves, with variable contributions from a Southwest Eurasian lineage. As the type species, the gray wolf epitomizes the genus: robust skull, powerful carnassials and cooperative packs capable of subduing large ungulates, while encompassing extensive geographic and ecological variation. North American eastern wolves form a distinct genomic cluster in the Great Lakes, St. Lawrence forests, and their recognition clarifies the hybrid origins of nearby coy wolves and Great Lakes wolves. The red wolf is critically endangered in the wild, but genome-wide surveys reveal persistent ghost red wolf ancestry in Gulf Coast canids, important for recovery genetics and historical biogeography. Finally, the coyote exemplifies Canis plasticity, a medium-sized generalist whose continent-wide expansion has been aided by admixture with wolves and dogs, adding adaptive variation for novel, human-dominated habitats. Pulling these strands together, the primitive Canis record charts a shift from jackal-like omnivores to hypercarnivorous, cursorial hunters, while living species illustrate how geography and ecology sculpt divergent body plans within a single genus. Canis familiaris then reframes the genus through domestication, social partnering, and worldwide dispersal with humans, even as Canis lupus remains the morphological and behavioral touchstone for pack hunting. In northeastern North America, Lycaon and Rufus highlight the genus's reticulate evolution, where conservation must grapple with both species integrity and the evolutionary value of admixture. And wherever latrans prospers, suburbs, rangelands, and forests alike, Canis shows how behavioral flexibility, diet breadth, and gene flow combine to sustain carnivores in rapidly changing ecosystems. Xenocyon comprises large, wolf-sized hypercarnivores, characterized by a proportionally short neurocranium and craniodental specializations for meat eating. From around 1.8 million years, the Eurasian hunting dog Lycaonoides dispersed across the Old World, with Dmanisi fossils indicating a cooperative, pack hunting ecology consistent with strong hypercarnivory. Functionally, This lineage shows cursorial adaptations and a trend toward forelimb digit reduction that culminates in the tetradactyl forefeet of its close relative Lycaon pictus. Evolutionarily, many authors view Lycanoides as near the base of the Lycaon, Cuon line, and some even propose reclassifying the whole Xenocyon complex within Lycaon as a set of chronospecies, underscoring its central role in the origin of Africa's painted dog and the Asian dhole. Known only from early Pliocene deposits in Mongolia, Neurocyon pairs an Eucyon-like cranial build with dentition adapted for omnivory, converging on the living raccoon dog's feeding ecology. As a probable stem canin, it is informative for how dietary flexibility emerged within Caninae, refining scenarios for early diversification toward the Canis lineage. A large late Pleistocene Cerdocyonine, Protocyon shows classic hypercarnivore craniodental traits, enlarged paracone and reduced protocone, and Brazilian material from Santa Vitória do Palmar indicates an animal roughly wolf-sized, consistent with pursuit of medium-bodied grazers and browsers. Isotopic data from the Brazilian intertropical region place its dietary niche alongside Smilodon populator, implying substantial trophic overlap and potential competition despite Protocyon's more modest body mass. Taphonomic studies further attribute tooth mark assemblages on Glyptotherium remains to large canids including Protocyon, compatible with cooperative predation or opportunistic carcass use, and, together with records extending into Yucatan, underscore this genus as a key player in South American carnivore guilds during the Great American Biotic Interchange. Robust-skulled and blade-toothed, Theriodictis exhibits hallmark hypercarnivorous features and adult body mass estimates around 37 kilograms, yielding a wolf-sized predator. Pampean and Turiga fossils indicate a hunter of open-country megafauna, camelids, cervids, equids, and large rodents, active from the early to early-late Pleistocene. Phylogenetically, it anchors the South American hypercarnivore radiation within Cerdocyonina, and recent systematic work even renders the genus paraphyletic by transferring Pterogensis to Protocyon, sharpening views on repeated evolution of extreme meat-eating in canids. An Amazon-endemic canid of a monotypic genus, Adelocinus is a solitary forest specialist with rounded, low ears, a fox-like tail, and partly webbed feet. Camera trap and field data show a diet far from strictly carnivorous, with notable frugivory alongside small vertebrates and aquatic prey. Ecologically, it is the only canid confined to Amazonia and a sensitive barometer of intact rainforest, yet it is assessed as near threatened and projected to lose substantial habitat to deforestation, making it a priority for landscape-scale conservation. Today represented by the crab-eating fox, Cerdocyon combines a grizzled gray-brown coat with reddish face and legs and black-tipped ears and tail, and it forages omnivorously on fruits, invertebrates, and small vertebrates across a wide range of neotropical habitats. Ecologically consequential as a common mesopredator assessed as least concern and a proven seed disperser, it helps structure disturbed landscapes. Meanwhile, the recent transfer of the supposed Pliocene, Cerdocyon avius to Ferrucyon sharpens the genus's fossil boundaries. South America's Zoros of the genus Lycalopex span cool Andean Puna to Pacific deserts and the Cerrado, with body sizes ranging from the tiny Cichuran fox to the robust Culpio and pelage typically gray rufous and grizzled rather than boldly patterned. Ecologically they are consummate omnivores. Pampas foxes can be seasonally fruit-dominated, and several species act as seed dispersers that reshape plant communities. Recent syntheses show the group diversified relatively rapidly in the Pleistocene after diverging from Cerdocyon, yielding today's 6 species across the subcontinent. Their conservation status is heterogeneous. Hoary foxes are near threatened in an embattled Cerrado, Pampas and gray foxes are generally least concern, whereas Lycalopex fulvipes is endangered. Where they overlap with livestock, especially the culpio, conflicts and retaliatory killing arise, prompting calls for coexistence strategies grounded in better data on movement and diet. Taken together, Lycalopex foxes are keystone mesopredators and seed vectors that knit together open and dryland food webs across much of South America. Compact and long-bodied with short legs, the bush dog Speothos carries partially webbed feet and a trenchant-heeled lower carnassial, dental streamlining that complements its cooperative, pack-hunting lifestyle on caviomorph rodents, armadillos, and similarly sized prey. Conservation-wise it is elusive, regionally patchy, and classed as near threatened with a declining trend, while camera trap records pushing into Central America and the fossil Piscivorus emphasize both its ecological sensitivity and its deep history within the neotropical canid guild. Comprising the extinct mainland Dusician avis and Cultrodons and the Falkland Islands wolf, Dusician were medium-bodied, jackal-like canids whose cranial ecomorphology points to a more meat-focused bite than other South American zoros. Radiocarbon and archaeological evidence indicate avis survived into the late Holocene, weighed around 15 kilograms, and was in some contexts even buried alongside humans, signs of close interaction on the Pampas and in Patagonia. Genetically, Australes diverged from avis and became isolated on the Falklands 16,000 years, yielding the island's only native terrestrial mammal and an emblematic case of quaternary dispersal and insular evolution. Long-legged with a raised black mane over a russet coat, the maned wolf is a crepuscular savanna canid whose omnivorous diet skews strongly frugivorous, especially toward the wolf apple, making it an important seed disperser in the Cerrado. As the sole species of its genus and a flagship of South American grasslands, it is ecologically influential yet listed as near threatened due to habitat loss and other pressures, underscoring its conservation value beyond charismatic looks. Defined from Pliocene fossils in the Refugio Formation of Baja California, Ferucian is a small, fox-like canid placed within Vulpini. Its mandible bears a pronounced subangular lobe, the lower carnassial lacks a distinct hypoconulate, and M3 is single-cusped, features that separate it from Cerdocyon and align it with Metalopex. Its reclassification in 2020 overturned the long-held view that Cerdocyon avius was a Cerdocyonine ancestor, refining Canine biogeography by showing a North American vulpine lineage rather than a stem for South American foxes. Known from around 9 million years ago deposits in the western U.S., Metalopex was a small, fox-like vulpine whose craniodental proportions align with generalized omnivory rather than extreme shearing specialization. Phylogenetically placed as sister to Eurocyon and preceding early Vulpus, it marks the earliest radiation of Vulpini in North America, an anchor point for timing fox dispersal and calibrating canid trait evolution. Fox-like canids with raccoonish facial masks, Nyctereutes includes the common and Japanese raccoon dogs and retains a broad omnivorous diet spanning fruits, invertebrates, and small vertebrates. Uniquely among canids, they undergo prolonged winter passivity torpor in cold climates, with measurable seasonal drops in body temperature and activity. Outside their native East Asia, raccoon dogs are established invasive aliens in Europe and can act as reservoirs or vectors of pathogens such as rabies and other zoonoses. The genus has a rich Old World fossil record, especially megamastoids in the Pliocene to Pleistocene of Europe, providing useful temporal anchors for canid dispersal and trait evolution. Small-bodied and late Pliocene to early Pleistocene in age, Prototocian shows bat-eared fox-like proportions but a more primitive dentition, consistent with generalized omnivory insectivory rather than extreme shearing. Because it nests close to, perhaps even within, the Otocian lineage, the genus is a key waypoint for tracing the origin and Afroasian dispersal of the bat-eared fox clade and for calibrating early canid molar evolution. With outsized pinnae and a tan, gray coat, Otocian is a small African canid whose unusual dentition, the highest tooth count among living canids owing to supernumerary lower molars, supports an insect-heavy diet dominated by harvester termites located via acute hearing. Socially monogamous groups with extensive male parental care make it an outlier among canids, while its broad distribution and least concern status belie its functional importance as a major predator of termites in eastern and southern savannas. Foxes of the genus Vulpus arose by the late Miocene, with early fossils such as the species Stenognathus in North America and Riffaudi in Chad anchoring the clade's Old and New World roots. Among living species, genomic work places the Cape fox as the earliest diverging lineage in the genus, a small, silver-backed omnivore of southern African drylands. Blandford's fox, a cliff-haunting, light-bodied Arabian, Levantine species, shows desert physiological specializations and is closely allied to other arid foxes in molecular trees. The fennec pushes xeric design to the limit with outsized pinnae and kidney-driven water economy, enabling near-waterless life in Saharan dunes. Across Asian steppe and semi-desert, the Corsac fox is a lightweight nomad whose populations boom and bust with prey and winter severity. In polar contrast, the Arctic fox carries furred footpads and seasonally color-changing, ultra-insulating pelage, tracking lemming cycles across the tundra while facing red fox encroachment under warming climates. The red fox, largest and most widespread, thrives from cities to taiga and, when introduced to Australia, became a powerful invasive mesopredator with heavy biodiversity costs. Phylogenetically, Ruppel's fox nests within the Palearctic clade alongside red foxes, with mitogenomic evidence pointing to a tight sister relationship likely shaped by historical introgression. On Asia's high, windy plateaus, the square-muzzled Tibetan fox is a pika specialist whose peculiar skull proportions reflect strong carnivorous bias and whose fortunes are tied to prey management on the steppe. In North American deserts, the kit fox is a nocturnal heat dodger that dens by day, forages solo, and rides prey pulses across austere shrublands. Fossil, proto-red foxes, of the European Pliocene to Pleistocene help time the split of Lagopus and Vulpus and calibrate body size and dental shifts within the crown group. New reviews synthesize a thin but global Vulpus fossil record, from North American Merton Formation occurrences to early Asian forms like Kuzhudingi, clarifying dispersal corridors between continents. Desert foxes repeatedly converged on large ears, lightweight builds, and low evaporative water loss, whereas cold-adapted Lagopus maximized insulation, parallel routes to energy balance that bracket the genus's biome breadth. Ecologically, Vulpus species are omnivores to hypercarnivores, acting as seed dispersers, rodent regulators, scavengers, and, where introduced, potent disruptors of native faunas. Taken together, the fossil and genomic timelines portray Vulpus as a swiftly radiating, biomechanics versatile lineage whose extremes, from dune runners to ice wanderers, make it a model for studying adaptation, introgression, and climate-driven range shifts in canids.